I'm sorry, can I get a roll call for attendance? I'm sorry, we have to turn the mics on, and I seem to forget to do that very often. Sorry.
Ms. Hernandez,
Present?
Mr. O'Regan, Mr. O'Regan,
Present.
Ms. Enriquez, Ms. Cabral,
Present.
Mr. Gomez Pereira,
Present.
Ms. Valderas,
Present.
Dr. Neville is absent today. Ms. Covas Caraballo,
Present.
Ms. Alfaro.
Present.
That's 7 present and 2 absent.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open our public comments meeting tonight with the first item for the school choice for the 2025-2026 school year. I will hand it over to Dr. Albeida.
I can explain what this is for. If anyone has any public comments, they can come up afterwards. Basically, what this is school choice, and it's the option if we were to, could we accept students from out of district into Chelsea Public Schools? And historically, the vote is always normally no, because we are already tight on space, and so we're not a school choice district. So that's basically, if we were to vote yes on that, then that would mean that we would accept students from other districts. But historically, again, it's normally, we're already tight on space for the students that we do have in Chelsea, so we are limiting our enrollment only to students that live in Chelsea.
Are there any public comments? Anyone who'd like to speak on this topic? Seeing none, I will close this section of the public comment for the school choice, and we'll move on to the second item, fiscal year 2025-2026 budget. Once again, I will open up public comments for this. I will hand it over to Dr. Albeida. Anyone who would like to come up and speak on this section, there is a 3-minute limit on speaking, so we will put a timer on. Unfortunately, we want to be able to make sure that everybody gets the same amount of time. So I will now hand it over to Dr. Albeida. I asked. Does anybody have public comments for this section, for the budget at this moment?
Madam Chair, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Just.
Oh, thank you. And anyone who's needing translation, we do have a Spanish translator. Please raise your hand and let us know. Thank you.
Everybody, my name's, excuse me, my name's Catherine Anderson. I'm a middle school special education teacher at the Brown and also the president of the Chelsea Teachers Union. I'm just speaking tonight. I want to thank Dr. Albeida and the entire school committee team for the budget process. This has been really an unprecedented year. There's been a lot of difficulty both within our district and nationally. We have a brand new finance director. I know it's been an incredibly difficult time, and I really appreciate that throughout the time we've had an opportunity to have conversations about how the budget's going to be affecting our students and affecting our staff, and that we've been able to experience a lot of receptive conversations and have been able to address those concerns in a lot of real-time ways. I know it's especially difficult this year, and I just want to thank Dr. Albeida for that openness. And I know this is a more difficult budget year than we've had for the past several years, now that we don't have ESSER funds, and as SOA is starting to slow down in terms of its implementation. But again, I appreciate that there's clearly an effort to prioritize student-facing services and to focus on keeping people in front of our kids and helping our kids stay learning and stay regulated and supported in the classroom. That's what they deserve, and I appreciate that that's what we're focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any public comments I'd like to make at this time? Okay, Better will read one that was turned in.
I have a public comment from Thomas Gordonier. He is an ESL teacher at the high school, and he lives in Cambridge. It has been heartening to learn that the district's current plan attempts to preserve classroom and support staff. My colleagues come in daily to support Chelsea students in learning and growing, and I can't think of a single one of them who wouldn't leave a hole in their position, if their position was cut. We should be focused on our students first, and where we concentrate our resources should reflect that. I appreciate that the district worked with the Chelsea Teachers Union to keep that focus. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no more further public comments, I'll hand it over to Dr. Albeida. Thank you.
So we have gone through many reiterations of this budget, and first I'd like to thank all of our school principals. I know we have two here, Mr. Morales, the Chelsea High School principal, and Margot is our principal at the Early Learning Center. Thank you for working, and all of our department heads. It is a long process. We get information from all the schools and then from all the departments, and we go through iterations of this budget. So those of you who've been paying attention, you can see that this is another iteration of our budget. I'd like to thank our president of our Chelsea Teachers Union, Catherine Anderson, and the vice president, Vanessa, for helping and giving us feedback as well. And of course, our school committee for being very supportive. So we're hoping that this is one of our last reiterations of the budget, and just very proud of what we will be presenting tonight. And so I'll go ahead and start. Here are our topics for tonight. I'll start off with we always start with the mission and strategy. Our mission is that Chelsea Public Schools is a gateway school system that welcomes and educates all students and families. And we also are aiming to know all of our students by name, strength, and story. This is our strategic plan. It is a 3 to 5 year strategic. We're in our third year of our fifth. This is a 5-year strategic plan. The different colors on the wheel all represent the 5 priority areas that we've been focused on. And so what we do is we have a strategic plan, and then we align our budget to that plan. The factors that are influencing this budget for the fiscal year 26 are our ESSER funds have ended. The Student Opportunity Act dollars, while we're extremely grateful for the dollars, there's not a significant increase from last year to this year, or the coming year. And then we did have a decreased enrollment by 60 students. And of course, we have increasing salary costs. As you know, inflation is very high, increasing higher than what everything else is. And so this is our budget timeline, and I'm actually going to ask our new Chief Financial Officer, this is her first budget season with us. I'm going to have Ms. Billy Jo Turner go through these slides. So welcome, Billy Jo. This is your first time presenting, so welcome.
Thank you. So this first slide, for those of you that have never gone through a school budget process before, in October, we're expected as a school district to report our enrollment. Every student that comes through, whether they have English as a second language, if they have special needs, if they're low income, all of these characteristics are reported to the Department of Ed. And then they determine, with that enrollment report, they determine an amount that we must spend on our students. It's a minimum requirement. So once they determine that amount, they determine how much of that the city should be able to afford and how much the state will afford. The next step in the budget process after enrollment determination is to update all of our expenses. So even if we maintain the same exact programming for this current year, for next year, you're gonna have all of the raises that the teachers get. You're gonna have cost increases, health insurance increases. Everything costs more every year. So we update our expenses. Then in January, the governor gives us their budget, which tells us how much money we're going to receive. So we update our revenue. When we know how much we're going to get for revenue, and we know how much it's going to cost to maintain the same level of teachers, paras, supplies, when we know those two figures, we can figure out what our shortfall would be. Once we know our shortfall, then we have to work with the superintendent and the principals, and we have to close the gap. If it's gonna cost 100 to maintain the same expenses and we only got 80, we have to close that $20 gap, right? So the majority of the budget is collecting data on expenses, revenue, then figuring out how much you're gonna be short and work with the superintendent to close that. The superintendent was determined to not let this shortfall impact the schools, so we had to really try hard to do different scenarios to make cuts without impacting the students. After the balancing part, we then bring it forward and present it to the community and to the school committee so that we can get it approved. Once it's approved, we submit it to the city council for them to approve as part of the city's budget. So that's the timeline. This next slide is just showing when we do the enrollment portion of reporting to DESE, when we report our students, not just the number of students impacts the total amount of the budget. The different factors like whether you're bilingual or low income impacts the budget as well. For instance, Chelsea went up 95 students that are bilingual, so we got an extra $833,000 for those students. Chelsea also lost 47 students that were considered low income, so then we lost a portion of money for those students. Overall, Chelsea lost 66 students, and that made us lose about $1.5 million, but overall, we still got an additional $9 million due to the Student Opportunity Act, which increases the value we get for all these characteristics. This next slide is showing what type of expenses you'll see in a school district. We have the majority of our budget is about 80% of salaries and labor and health insurance. Then we have facilities, information technology, professional development, special education, supplies, books, and equipment. So those are the type of expenses we're updating each year. It won't move, oh, there we go. This slide is showing you what we do as a preliminary calculation of what our expenses will be. Even when we know we're just going to maintain the same expenses as the previous year, we know that we're gonna have the raises, we're going to have step increases, we're gonna have increases to health insurance rates, we're gonna have increases to special ed tuition. For those of you that don't know what that is, when we have students with special needs, if we cannot service them in our district, we can send them to specialized schools, but we have to pay for that. That cost will increase at least $2.5 million this year. Transportation is another thing that we see rate increases every year, so we're expecting $255,000 more for that. Utilities and insurance, we're expecting $102,000 more in contractual increases. Overall, before we even started, we knew that we needed $11.5 million just to maintain this current year's budget. This spreadsheet is really, for those of you who like to dig into the weeds, this calculation will show you that we have our revenue at the top, which is your Chapter 70 money, that's state aid. The state funds more than 80% of Chelsea's education budget. Then it shows you the portion that's coming from the city, And it shows you an elaborate calculation. More or less, it's showing that we're going to have $155 million to spend on Chelsea Public Schools. If you go down, it will show you that, I'm going to point it out. The things that I'm pointing out would be the $155 million, that's what we're getting as our budget. If you go down, it shows you the amount that the city gives us on top of their request. Oh, sorry, better still. Sorry. Okay, thank you. So that, the highlighted areas are the ones that you should pay attention to. You see at the top that the $25 million that the city gave us, that's their required minimum contribution. If you go down to the bottom highlighted area, that's the amount that the city gave us above the minimum contribution. This is extra money that they're giving us. They gave us $5 million extra dollars. This is just a slide showing you the different types of revenue that the city of Chelsea gets. Most important is to know that the majority of our funding comes from Chapter 70 state aid. The next highest bucket is coming from the city. Then we also have grants and revolving fund balances that help us fund the district. This is just another slide showing it visually, how we have the Chapter 70 city revolving funds and grants. Budget development inputs, even after we do all of the budget and the expenses, revenue, and balancing, we want the input from the community. So we've had 3 community conversations, one on January 29th, February 3rd, and February 10th. We've also presented at school committee meetings to get feedback through that avenue. We've also made sure that the strategic plan that shows our priorities in this district, that our budget matches that. And then we also met with principals and schools to get their input for school and department request information. This is what we've heard from our conversations, and I believe the superintendent will share this.
Sure. So with our community conversations, we had 3 different community conversations, one for elementary staff, another for high school staff, and then for the community. And what we heard from our community conversations, we asked 3 questions: what's working, what's not, what would you like to see improved? And so I'll just go over a little bit here. So what we heard from our educators is that they really liked high-quality instructional materials. They appreciated the addition of MLE positions, both at the schools and the district level. They also appreciated the addition of special education staff, social workers, counselors, and they're happy about the new building purchase. We just purchased a building for Chelsea Opportunity Academy and for the Intergenerational Literacy Program and for the Chelsea Virtual Learning Academy offices. And then we also heard from parents that what's working is pre-K, our parent square communication, extended learning. And then what's not working and what we could improve upon in our budget, what we heard from educators was that maybe to balance the budget, look to cut licenses that were not being used, our ESS, which is our company for substitute services, maybe take a look at how we're using that. We also, they said maybe extended learning and central office positions and more tier 2 training for teaching reading. What we heard from parents is that they would like more ESL classes at the Intergenerational Literacy Program, more full-day pre-K, and then, of course, if down the road, they would love us to have more Caminos programming. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Can you hear me? Okay. So this next slide is just another calculation for those of you that like to get into the math. More or less, this slide is simply trying to show that at the bottom, we had a $3.4 million shortfall after we updated our revenue and expenses. That's hard to close when you have $3.4 million. The superintendent worked closely with the city and got them to commit $2.1 million above the minimum to offset this deficit. which brought us down to 1.2 million. And even as the superintendent would work with the school leaders to close that gap, then we would find out we need to add more expenses if we needed additional special ed teachers. So the numbers constantly fluctuate. We add, we subtract, we end up closing a shortfall and then getting a new one. So this is showing that the $3.4 million shortfall we started with was closed by the city contribution and the superintendent working with leaders to make cuts that impacted the schools the least. The next slide, I believe the superintendent will share with you all the reductions and cuts that were made at the district level.
So for those of you that have been watching, this is a slide that you have seen before. So what we've done, and this is our reductions and cuts at the district level. And so you can see all of the things that we are reducing to balance this budget. One is reducing professional development with a DEEP contract, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to have DEEP, but it means that we're streamlining the contract. We will still have this partner with us, but not at the extent that we had it last year. We're reducing the focus monitoring visits with SchoolWorks. At one time, SchoolWorks was required by our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It was the partner that DESE used and required us, and now that DESE is going with another company called AIR, we do not see the need for duplication, so we will not be using SchoolWorks. We'll still use the tool for evaluation, but not the monitoring visits. We're reducing online services tutoring with FEV. We're reducing one staff in the HR department, and then 2 mediation specialists. And then we are reducing the triangle contract, which is in special ed, 1 staff in special ed department, 2 special education translators that we never filled at the district level, special education a Braille translator that is no longer needed, and then reducing some in buildings and grounds, and then extended learning. This coordinator position has not been filled for a while, so we're keeping it vacant. And then with information technology, we are shifting the carrier that we have, and so that will create some savings. And then we just will not be refreshing the Chromebooks as frequently. So that is page 1. The next reductions and the cuts that we have at the schools, we tried to keep it very minimal. At the ELC, two tutors, those are retirees. The Berkowitz is 1 MLE teacher that was never filled this year and is currently vacant. And at the Kelly/Brown, we have the program, the Caminos program, moving from the Kelly to the Brown, and in that transition, there's 1 FTE that we will not need. And then at Chelsea High School, 1 assistant principal, because we have added during when time we had the finances, we added an extra assistant principal or operational leader. And as Mr. Morales knows, I had told him this may not last forever. So we are reducing by 1 assistant principal. Adds, conversions to the schools, we are adding. We have to, because we need to be in compliance with special education. 1 special education teacher at the ELC, actually 2. And then we're converting 1 physical education teacher to a science specialist. At the Hooks, we're adding a special education inclusion coach, as that school is receiving more special education students. At Clark Avenue, converting science to MLE, a math to MLE, and a history to MLE. And then at Clark, we're also adding 1 MLE teacher. And then multilingual education. You're welcome. And then at the district level, just want to make sure, okay, we're adding ESY, which is therapy services for students in special education. Our wellness office, stipends for navigators. Navigators are staff that we've hired to work after school to reach out to families and students and do home visits. We have also stipends for navigator PD professional development. Then we are adding safety care and trainee stipends. And then every year we have to have consumables for curriculum instruction, so we have to build that into our budget every year, and this year it's a little higher. So we're adding, that would be an add. And then in athletics at the high school, we're adding stipends for coaches. And we have one more budget, we have two more budget meetings, one on the 20th and another budget meeting on the 27th. And that concludes our budget presentation for tonight. We are open for questions and comments.
Are there any questions or comments you'd like to make at this moment after seeing the presentation? I know it's a lot of information. A lot of hard work has gone into putting this budget together and keeping the cuts down to a minimum. I just think that that is a comment I need to make, because I think that everyone needs to understand that there's a lot of hard work that goes behind the scenes to putting together this budget and trying not to cut. No cuts are good. And we would prefer no cuts to have to take place. But unfortunately, with all the changes that are coming, we've had to make some cuts. Luckily, not directly to our schools. And hopefully, we keep our fingers crossed for next year, because we have no promises and no real indication of where we'll be for next year. But, Johnny?
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Super insightful, and also Sully, also for the budget books and like uplifting some of the art from some of our students, which is really amazing. My question is regards to sort of like district enrollment regarding low-income students. I was reading the budget book and also just sort of looking at, I don't know what slide this is, but essentially the breakdown with all of the pre-K students, half-day kindergarten, all of those lines. I'm wondering how students are able to like be identified as low income, because clearly that has a component on how much the state is giving us. I know in the budget book it mentions that, you know, there's maybe some cross-referencing with, you know, programs that provide like SNAP, things like that. I'm wondering if there's the option for students to sort of like self-certify, like what are the mechanisms that are currently used? Because I know that we have a large population of students that are possibly living in mixed income households or mixed documentation status households that may not qualify for things like SNAP or Mass Health, so they may not end up on these lists, thus impacting, you know, that there's money on the table. They might qualify as low income, but because they're undocumented or whatever the case may be, that's not being accounted for. So just trying to get a sense of what that looks like. I don't know who might be best to answer that question. Thank you.
That is a very real concern that we did face, the whole state. They did try to modify from using the SNAP programs. They would cross-reference, but as you said, undocumented people were not being filtered into that, so they converted to another way of calculating the poverty rate for a district several years ago, but they found that it was better to use the SNAP method, that we were getting a higher percentage for that They even put a CEP program in place where if a district does have a lot of people that are undocumented, that we can provide free lunch for everyone rather than go through the free lunch process that would take into account SNAP recipients. So you're right, they did modify the process to try to catch the undocumented people in our numbers, but being that it wasn't helpful, they went back to the regular version, which is to cross-reference with state agencies.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And you mentioned an acronym, CEP. Could you just tell me what that means?
You know why I refer to it as CEP? Because I actually never, it's community, I think it's community eligibility provisions, or the CEB program, but it's more or less free lunch for an entire district rather than going through the free lunch application process.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Johnny. Any other questions that you'd like to make at this time?
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this presentation. And all these community conversations have been so insightful. And thank you to all who are here present today. And I hope you all will be attending our future meetings later this month. I was wondering if you could provide additional context around the conversion of like the content lead teachers to multilingual educators at the Clark Ave.
I'll do my best, but it was actually very confusing for me too. I had a call with the principal this morning as we were going through it, and they're changing their model of servicing multilingual students, and so that's why they're converting. The teachers need to have a multilingual education license, and so what we're doing is if the teachers that are currently there, if they don't have an MLE license, then we're giving them the opportunity to get an MLE license, and we'll grandfather that until they get and we'll help pay for tuition or whatever it is that they can, so that way they're not, being like, we're not saying goodbye to them, but we're giving them an opportunity to really stay in their position, but get the multilingual education license, the EL license.
That's really awesome, and just the additional support for our multilingual learners, so thank you so much.
And you can see we did, to make this work though, because it's, if it's a program, then to make it work schedule-wise, we had to add one more FTE to it as well to make it work for the schedule.
I just want to say thank you so much to the superintendent and the school committee. We have a goal that it was to protect the students and the staff, especially students, and we did this year, and I hope, we can pray for next year that something can change so we can support again the students. For us, it's very important to really have the quality for the student first and the support than anything else. And we have shown by this budget, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who's supporting. Thank you for everybody who's part of this, and thank you for you guys that are here. We are your voices, and you need to be and speak up what are your needs, because if you don't speak up, nobody's gonna hear you. And I just want to say thank you again.
Good evening, everybody. Youth, welcome. This is your house. How do you feel? You're learning a lot? You're gonna go to the State House now, right? You have a lot of context. So that's, Mary Jo, thank you, such a great presentation. Very detailed that we have here. And I would just like to say that we also like to thank you, Dr. Albeira. I know you have been behind the scenes communicating with the city manager so that we can get more funds. Thank you. It takes a village so that we can build what we have in our community. And thank you for all you do.
All set? Johnny?
Just another question regarding low-income students. So I'm looking at the slide that is before the expenditure breakdown. I don't know if that would be helpful to see, but I'm seeing a number of low-income students, and then there is a amount. I think it's 51,754,000, yada yada yada. Is that that total number, that 5,870, the number of low-income students that we have in the district? And is that 51 million the total amount that we get for those low-income students? I'm just, I think, having a hard time figuring out what these numbers are just because there isn't, what's it called, a label at the top part. Yep, one more, keep going, one more time.
And that's it, I think.
There we go, yep. So I can't tell you, yeah, the low-income line, so I'm seeing 5,870 students per, well, that's for last year, but for this year, right, the same question still applies. 5,823 students, right, and then that 57,488, is that the total amount that we're getting specifically just for that low-income population within our schools?
Yes, so you're catching on quick because this is, that was exactly what I was trying to show, that if you lose 47 low-income students, it actually impacts that 57 million that we receive. So 57 million of our budget is specifically for the number of low-income students we have. The confusing part, for any of you that do dig in, you may look at the loss of 47 students and think that, well, how did we still get a $5.7 million increase despite the fact that we cut some of the low-income students? That's because there's two things impacting the amount. A rate increase from Student Opportunity Act, they increase the amount we get due to low-income students. So that amount is going up simultaneously with losing 47 students. But the net effect of the low-income student count is that we went up 5.7 million this year despite the cut of, but yes, you're right, 57.4 million for the 5,823 students is specifically for the low-income status.
Gotcha, so that increase in the rate is that 9,873 that I'm seeing there, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. And then in terms of like identifying English language learners, how does that happen with our schools? Is that just sort of like a pick thing, right? Like parents enroll their students? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if there's no more public comments or questions at this point, I'd like to close this public comment section of the budget. And I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
We will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.